So last week we were looking at the question, how long were the Israelites in the land of Egypt? And we noticed that Abraham was given a prophecy that his descendants would be afflicted and mistreated for 400 years, and that afterwards they would come out with great possessions, and we saw that that was at the point of the Exodus. So we went backwards from the Exodus 400 years, and we called that time span the affliction. Then we noticed in Exodus chapter 12, verses 40 and 41, at the point of the Exodus, we are told that the sojourn, or the temporary stay, is what sojourn means. The sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in the land of Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass, after 430 years, on the very same day, that they came out of Egypt. So again, we have the point of the Exodus, and this time we have a time span that goes 430 years that ends at the Exodus as well. So we surmised that they were in Egypt for a total of 430 years, and that for the last 400 years that they were in slavery and under great affliction. And we'll look at that in more detail later. We also notice the sequence of events with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now we want to notice that the Bible gives us ages for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob at various points. So we're going to look at that. So if we want to turn first to Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12, verses 4 and 5. It says, "So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran." So we see that Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran, so we'll make a note of that. Next, we want to look in chapter 21 of Genesis. Turn over to chapter 21. In verse 5. Genesis chapter 21, verse 5. It says, "Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him." So we'll make a note of that as well. Then we want to turn to Genesis chapter 25. And starting in verse 24. This is when Rebekah was pregnant with Jacob and Esau, and she was ready to give birth. Starting in verse 24 of Genesis 25, says, "So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau. Afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them." So now we know that Isaac was 60 years old when Jacob was born. And the last one we want to look at is Genesis chapter 47. And this is when Jacob brought the family down into Egypt with the famine. And Joseph brought Jacob to Pharaoh and introduced them. And in Genesis chapter 47, starting in verse 7. Verse 7 of Genesis 47. "Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, 'How old are you?' And Jacob said to Pharaoh, 'The days of my years of my pilgrimage are 130 years.'" So now we know that Jacob was 130 years old when they entered Egypt. So we'll make a note of that as well. And now we have a detailed chronology from the time that Abraham left Haran until they entered Egypt. So what we want to do now is add those up and we'll let you do that, and we'll look at it some more next week. And then what we'll do is we'll connect, since we know that's the point where they entered Egypt, we'll connect that to what we did last week, and see if that holds true, that that was when they entered Egypt at the beginning of that 430 years. So we'll see you next week.